I am Noah Bennett from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That day I decided to go for camping with my girlfriend, so we wasted no time and started packing. But I didn't realize this camp would change my life forever. The drive up from Pittsburgh took nearly 4 hours, and by the time I turned onto that unmarked gravel road, the sun was already bleeding into the tree line in ribbons of orange and deep crimson. I had picked this spot because the map showed nothing for 30 miles. No campsites, no ranger stations, no cell towers, nothing but a vast green emptiness that seemed to swallow the idea of civilization whole. My girlfriend Dana had been nervous about the lack of cell service, but I convinced her that was the whole point. We needed to escape the constant buzzing of notifications, the endless scroll of social media, the weight of screens that had become an invisible chain around both our necks. We needed to remember what silence sounded like, what real darkness felt like, what it meant to be alone with nothing but each other and the natural world. We had been together for 3 years, and somewhere along the way, we had lost ourselves in the noise of everyday life. And this trip was supposed to be our chance to find our way back to each other, to remember why we had fallen in love in the first place. The clearing where we pitched our tent sat at the edge of a small meadow, surrounded by white pines that stood like silent witnesses to our arrival, their needles carpeting the ground in soft brown layers that crunched beneath our boots. The tent went up easily enough, and we ate canned beans while watching the sky turn from orange to purple to a black so complete it felt like the universe had closed its eyes and decided to sleep. The stars that emerged were countless, dense, impossible to count, and they seemed to press down on the clearing with an almost physical weight. Dana leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and for a few perfect moments, everything felt exactly right. She fell asleep before 10, her breathing slow and steady beside me, her face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. I stayed awake a little longer, staring at the canvas ceiling, listening to the wind move through the branches like a whispered conversation in a language I couldn't quite understand. That's when I first heard it, or thought I did. A sound, somewhere between a branch snapping and a footstep, somewhere to my left, just beyond the range of our lantern's failing light. I told myself it was an animal, probably a deer moving through the underbrush, probably something completely ordinary and explainable. I told myself a lot of things that night, and I believed every single one of them, because believing was easier than confronting the alternative. I woke at 2:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because my watch glowed when I lifted my wrist, the green numbers cutting through the darkness like a tiny beacon, and I remember thinking how strange it was that I had woken at all. There had been no sound, no movement, nothing to pull me from sleep except my own sudden alertness, my own body deciding that something was wrong before my mind had fully registered the fact. Dana was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful in the faint light that filtered through the tent fabric, her lips slightly parted, her breathing steady and untroubled. She looked so young in that moment, so vulnerable, and something protective stirred in my chest, some instinct telling me to keep her safe from whatever had woken me. At first, I heard nothing. Then I heard everything. The rustle of mice in the undergrowth, the distant call of an owl, the tent canvas shifting in the breeze, the subtle sounds of a world that never truly slept. And underneath those sounds, something else, something wrong, a rhythm, a pattern, footsteps. They were circling the tent, slow, deliberate, measured, like someone taking their time, like someone who had all the patience in the world and absolutely nowhere else to be. The sound circled from behind me to my left, then the front, then my right, Whoever, or whatever, was out there moved with a steady rhythm, like a ritual being performed with absolute precision. They were close, too close. Close enough that if I pressed my palm against the tent wall, I might touch whatever was on the other side. They never stopped, never paused, never showed any sign they knew we were inside, just circling, patient as stone. I wanted to wake Dana, to share the terror, to have someone else tell me this was real. But some ancient part of my brain whispered that stillness was safety, that movement would only draw attention. So I lay there, frozen, my heart pounding, listening until the footsteps completed their circuit. And then they stopped. Not gradually, just stopped, like someone had pressed pause on the world. I waited an hour before I finally relaxed. By morning, I had convinced myself it was a deer, or a bear, or the wind. I believed every excuse, because believing was easier than admitting what I had actually heard. The second night was worse. We had spent the day hiking to a nearby stream, skipping stones across the clear water, watching the ripples spread out in perfect circles until they vanished against the banks. We had laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks, and I had almost managed to forget the terror of the previous night. Almost. But Dana noticed I was quieter than usual, more watchful, my eyes constantly scanning the tree line, my ears straining for any sound that didn't belong. She attributed it to exhaustion and didn't push, which I was grateful for, because I wasn't ready to tell her what I had heard, what I had been convinced I had heard. I wasn't ready to share that kind of fear, the kind that rooted itself in your chest and spread through your veins like ice water. We ate dinner as the sun went down, canned soup heated over our camp stove, and I watched the light die across the meadow with a growing sense of dread that I couldn't explain and couldn't shake. That night, I fell asleep, hoping the footsteps would find somewhere else to be. I was wrong. I woke at 2:47 again. The same green numbers glowing like an alarm I couldn't shut off. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined everything. Then the footsteps returned, exactly like before. But this time, they stopped. They simply stopped at the front of the tent, and the silence that followed was worse than any sound. I could hear breathing now, not animal breathing, something wet and human and wrong. It was coming from less than a foot away from where my head rested, and it just kept going, in, out, with a patience that felt inhuman. I grabbed Dana's arm and squeezed until she woke, confused and frightened. I shushed her, pointed toward the front, my voice refusing to work. We both stared at the canvas wall, frozen as the breathing continued inches away. Something was standing right there, separated from us by nothing but thin fabric, and it was content to wait while we fell apart. The breathing continued for maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours, like days, like we had been trapped in that moment since the beginning of time, and would remain trapped until the end of it. Then it stopped, and the footsteps resumed their slow circling pattern, moving away from the front and back around to the side, exactly as they had the night before. But something had changed. I could feel it in the quality of the silence, in the weight of the darkness, in the way Dana's hand found mine and squeezed with a desperation that told me she understood something was very wrong. When dawn finally came, we found marks in the soft earth outside our tent, clear and unmistakable in the morning light. Human footprints, barefoot, and they circled our tent exactly 7 times before stopping at the front flap, each print perfectly formed, each toe clearly defined, as if whoever had made them had been walking in slow motion, as if they had been savoring each step. I counted them myself, standing there in the morning light, feeling something cold settle into my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. 7 circuits. 7 times around our tent in the middle of the night while we lay there paralyzed with fear. 7. And then they stopped directly in front of us, and they breathed, and they waited. I didn't know what the number meant, if it meant anything at all, but I knew I would never forget it. I knew I would count those steps in my head for the rest of my life, every time I tried to sleep, every time the darkness pressed in around me, every time my mind drifted back to that moment and that number and what it might signify. We almost left that third morning. Almost. We stood by the tent, looking at the footprints, at the perfect circles etched into the earth, at the evidence of something we couldn't explain and didn't want to understand. Dana wanted to pack up immediately, to drive back to Pittsburgh, to put as much distance between us and this place as humanly possible. And part of me, the rational, survival-focused part, agreed with her completely. But something else, some darker, more stubborn part of my brain, wanted answers. I wanted to understand what was happening, to find some logical explanation, some rational justification for what we had experienced. If I could just find a reason, some evidence that there was a normal explanation, then maybe the fear would become manageable. Maybe I could sleep again without the footsteps echoing in my skull. Dana didn't understand my need to stay, and I couldn't fully explain it, couldn't articulate the strange compulsion I felt to not just run away, to not simply pretend it hadn't happened. So we compromised, and we stayed, and we told ourselves we were looking for something, anything, that would prove this was all just a misunderstanding, a series of coincidences, nothing more. We spent the day exploring deeper into the forest than we had before, telling ourselves we were looking for scenic trails, beautiful vistas, anything to justify our continued presence in this place that had started to feel less like a refuge and more like a trap. But we were looking for something else, something we didn't fully acknowledge even to ourselves. We were looking for any sign of other people, any evidence that we weren't as alone as we thought, any hint that someone else had been here before us and might have answers for what we were experiencing. We found nothing. No trails, no old campsites, no abandoned shelters, no evidence that anyone had been in these woods for years, decades, maybe centuries. The forest was pristine and empty and silent in a way that felt wrong somehow. Not peaceful, but expectant, like it was holding its breath, like it was waiting for something to happen. The trees were old here, older than any I had ever seen, their trunks thick and their branches reaching upward like grasping fingers, and the silence between them felt heavy, oppressive, like the air itself was waiting. We walked for hours without speaking, our footsteps the only sound in a world that seemed designed for silence. And I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something watching us from between the trees, something patient and still and utterly unmoving. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay there with my eyes open, watching the tent ceiling, waiting. Dana fell asleep eventually, her exhaustion winning out over her fear. I couldn't let go. I couldn't stop waiting for those footsteps, and when they came, at 2:47 exactly, like clockwork, I was ready. They circled, slow and patient. But this time, when they reached the front of the tent, they didn't just stop. They spoke. A whisper, barely audible, pressed through the canvas like fog. "You've been here before." 3 words from something with no lips, no tongue, just air moving through an empty mouth. A voice that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. How could I have been here before? I had never been anywhere near this forest, this place in my entire life. But the voice said it with absolute certainty, and something deep inside me shifted with a primal fear that maybe, just maybe, it was right. Dana woke beside me, her eyes snapping open as she heard it too. She was crying, her hands pressed over her ears, but the voice repeated the phrase anyway. Exactly the same. Then silence. The footsteps resumed circling, and I understood with cold clarity that we had been marked, chosen, found. This wasn't random. Something had been waiting for us, and now it wanted us to know. We belonged here. The forest wasn't empty. It was waiting, and it had been expecting us all along. We fled the next morning, hands shaking, equipment thrown into bags with no care, driving down that gravel road too fast. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see what might be watching us leave. Dana sat beside me, face blank, eyes fixed on the road ahead. We drove for hours in silence until we reached the highway, until other cars and buildings surrounded us again. Something loosened in my chest. I told myself we were safe. I told myself it was over. But every night I woke at 2:47, and for those few seconds before consciousness returned, I heard footsteps circling my bed. The same rhythm, the same pattern. Dana got worse. She stopped sleeping entirely, spending her nights at the window, face pressed to the glass, watching. She said there was a figure at the edge of our yard. When I looked, I saw nothing. But I felt it. A presence. A weight pressing against me every moment, pushing me towards something I couldn't see. We fought constantly, snapped over nothing. We were both falling apart, and we both knew why. Neither of us could say it out loud. The forest had followed us home. On the fourth night after we'd returned, I found Dana standing in the backyard at 2:47 in the morning. I had woken, as usual, felt the footsteps circling, and gone to find her. She was barefoot, her feet muddy from the grass, her eyes open but seeing nothing, and she was walking toward the tree line at the back of our property with a slow, steady pace that I recognized with a horror that went beyond fear. She was walking the way the footprints had circled our tent. She was following the pattern. I called her name. She didn't respond. She just kept walking toward the darkness with that terrible patient inevitability. I grabbed her arm, pulled her back, and she looked at me with eyes that looked through me rather than at me. Eyes that held something I didn't recognize, something that had moved in and made itself at home. "The forest knows my name now," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. "It's been calling me back. It says I've always been here, and I always will be." She smiled, a small, distant smile that didn't reach her eyes, and something inside me broke. We left Pittsburgh that same week, told our families we were moving for work, for a fresh start. We moved to the West Coast, to a city of concrete and glass where the forest was just an abstract concept. We thought distance would help. We thought time would heal. But sometimes, late at night, when even the traffic has faded, I still wake at 2:47. Sometimes I hear footsteps circling my bed, slow and patient. And sometimes, when I'm very still and very quiet, I hear that voice pressing through the walls. You can't outrun what you've already become. I lie there in the darkness and wonder if it's true, if something in me has already changed, already been claimed. The hollow hours never end. They just find new places to hide. And I have learned that some distances don't matter. Some darkness can't be escaped. And some voices, once heard, never stop speaking. The forest remembers. The forest waits. And somewhere, in the spaces between the trees, something is still circling, still breathing, still whispering the name it has always known. The name that belongs to me as surely as my own heartbeat.